Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Brent, and summer has finally arrived.
This is Nick, and I am absolutely one who knows that there is, in fact, no rest for the wicked. Or Kyle.
And this is Kyle. I'm on a boat, and it's going approximately 20 knots. And this is, if I may, episode 5. Let's go.
All right, so if I
First
may,
off, I guess let's go ahead.
if I may, could you explain why you're on a boat? Fill us in, please.
Yeah, so I'm currently on my honeymoon with my wife, who is attempting to sleep on the bed next to me because it is 3:30 in the morning for us right now. And yeah, I'm on a boat because that's how cruises work. Having a good time. We showed up in Rome. We did that for a couple days, and then we jumped on the cruise. Yesterday for me, today for you guys. We stopped at Santorini. It's a small island off the coast of Greece, and it was pretty cool. We didn't really plan to do any excursions there, and we're glad we didn't because it was one of those things where the entire island, it's like, I get it. It only took like 1 hour or 2 hours for me to understand everything the island potentially had to offer. It's got a lot of white buildings with blue rooftops, and that's its thing. Otherwise, it's just a huge tourist thing where you're lots of shops.
So and the shops
tomorrow we're docking.
Do it all?
We bought my mom a something which I can't reveal because she apparently listens to the podcast now, as well as Brent's mom. But yeah, we bought my mom a something, and we also got a plan for what we're going to potentially buy my two brothers at some point in time, most likely in Athens. But yeah, it was just mainly shops. But it was fun. But I'm glad we didn't really do any excursions.
If I may, sir, I would like to credit your dedication to this channel. If I were on my honeymoon and I would have suggested something such as this, I guarantee the answer would have been no by not only my fiance, but also myself. Admittedly, you are quite the dedicated individual, and I do appreciate that. That's above and beyond, and it is duly noted, sir.
If I may, Nick, you should have the opportunity to prove yourself in the coming year, I'm sure, as you're on your own honeymoon, or just schedule it from Wednesday to Monday. That could also work for honeymoon. You have a very small window.
I will not be scheduling a future honeymoon based on the If I May podcast. Much as I take this to heart, that will not be happening. Good effort, though.
So Kyle is podcast MVP, I think we've decided.
Oh, far away and above, yes.
Yes, and I'm glad to hear that you guys will be helping split the cost of internet for me for this podcast.
How much are we talking?
I'm just kidding.
So
for 24 hours, one device is like $30.
Okay, we can make that happen.
We could do that. So
I'm just kidding. It's fine. Vouchers actually, so it's
pretty good. So
go ahead, Brent.
On your trip, you toured Rome, I know, and sent us some fun videos. I'm thinking, should that be edited into the podcast itself? Give a little live look into what it's like to be on the streets of Rome in this day and age, or not?
I think that would be
I think I might.
Not all of it, just the good parts. And I feel like we've lost Kyle.
I'm gonna say cut out there. Let's give him a second or two. Well, we may have lost Kyle, unfortunately. The show must go on. If we can reconnect, we'll get him. He is, in fact, on the other side of the planet for the most part, on a boat, as we understand it. In the interim, shall we proceed to perhaps your topic or mine?
Yeah, no, I'll go for it. So moved to Seattle. I think we're on week 2 now. It's been going incredibly well so far. But one thing I've just kind of been thinking about and noticing is you make a move, especially if you go to a different state, as I'm sure you know, and Kyle will soon find out. But you make a move, and there's a lot of big things to think about. Like you have to move all of your things, and you know, you get a new job, you have to do all that kind of thing. But I think one thing I've started to notice is that there's a lot of little changes that just keep kind of popping up, and I start noticing that I never really expected. Getting things like a new driver's license, that was it's kind of like, it's not that big, but all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, like I have a new driver's license. That's pretty nifty. Or like the commute, I went to work the same way every day for the last year, and now all of a sudden it's a whole new kind of set of routine that I have to find, or even finding a new grocery store. So I think it's been interesting kind of stepping back a little bit from this whole big move and think like, well, actually my whole regular life, like my little stuff, is all changing too. It's kind of nifty.
Yeah, there's a lot that...
Oh, he lives.
You bet.
I know, I'm back. This great internet. One thing that I'm kind of thinking, is like getting your people. Like, you got to get a guy for your stuff. Like, ideally, for whenever you need your car fixed, you got a guy for that.
Slavery is wrong.
That's not what he meant. That's not what he meant. We don't condone that
you gotta get
on
your
the
person.
show.
Yeah.
I'm appalled.
Fair enough.
But yeah, you need a guy to fix your car. You need a guy for your haircut, or or girl, whatever. But you need to get your people all set up.
Now we're sexist.
You could have a guy do your haircut or a girl. It doesn't matter. But you have to have that person. You have to find you. I agree, and it's kind of interesting because I feel like I'm starting a new, like I'm getting into a new routine, and it's been great. Like all of a sudden I've turned into a morning person. It helps when you go 2 hours back in the past, it seems like, with this time zone. So if it was 8 o'clock, Central Time, what I was used to, now I'm waking up at 6, and I was like, that feels great. So that's been kind of it too, is I have this chance to kind of create a new routine, but it's a little bit of a process doing that.
You've done it before though, correct? I mean, you've been in the same time zone, but you've lived up near the boundary waters. You've moved around for college, and every one of those comes with changes. I guess you obviously didn't always have to change your driver's license or make long-term, what I'll call relatively big commitments like that. But the finding the grocery store, the figuring out what you do with your routine, the waking up and going to work or going to whatever it is that you've always done. It's unique, but I guess with the little bit of moving I've done, I don't enjoy it. I think that's why one of the reasons we are looking into a more permanent option for Megan and I. But the picking up and moving, even if it's in the same city, I do know that the feeling of being unsettled and not having things figured out. And Megan thinks it's ridiculous that I'm not settled after having been somewhere for the first couple months. And it's like, well, no, I like to be really settled, like knowing that it's just a mental state of knowing that I'm going to be in one place, that I go play basketball at the same gym, certain mornings, that I have the grocery store. I think that's a great example. That loyalty to, that's where I go. I always go to Cub, or I always go to Aldi, or in Appleton, you always go to Cops. Those little things, they add up, and you kind of have to figure out your new routine. And you're fortunate, I think, in the sense that you're going to be there for a number of years, which would be a little bit better in my mind than the year-to-year lifestyle that a number of our friends have over here. And they've been, I think, stationary for maybe coming up on more than a year now. I think they've renewed a lease or two, which was relatively new, staying in one place. But I guess it's interesting because some people are perfectly comfortable as long as they're in the same city. I being born and raised in the same city, I left for college and didn't really have a problem, but that was always kind of a glorified vacation in a lot of ways. I guess I learned some stuff too, or whatever, but I always knew I was coming back to the Appleton area, and that is where I'm familiar. That's where I have connections. I played basketball with the same group every morning since I was 16, that I was essentially raised into as a young man. So still know a lot of those guys, still have those connections, and to form new groups is tough, but I do actually have that now. I have a group of individuals I play morning basketball with on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays at 5:30 in the morning, and it was really cool to find that. That was a big step for me. And I found a different group when I was in St. Paul, but it wasn't the same. They were more competitive, certainly not more talented, but if they didn't win, they got very upset. So
all right,
it's
so
cool. It's cool to see all those little changes.
So if I may, so your thing was, I think there's always kind of one thing to like one set of your routine that once you kind of get that switched over and you find that, then it helps you feel a lot more at home. And I think in your case, that was finding your basketball group. What I'm kind of finding is I've gotten a lot of like just getting into a running routine. I used to run at night when it was cooler because Wisconsin gets super hot. And I was just like, well, I don't want to run at night in Seattle. So even just waking up early, going for a quick run has just been like something that's like, it's part of my routine. And I kind of like, I found it and I've been able to ground myself in it. Kyle, this is for you. When you move to where you are now, or maybe when you're moving, what is the thing that when you have that figured out, you're kind of there, you're settled in.
As long as I have internet, I'm good.
The one constant.
No,
I live on a boat
question.
now. I live on a boat now. There's internet here.
Yep, I'm officially living here.
I'm home.
I think the main thing will just be the routine. Like having that routine where it's like, okay, Thursday is my whatever day. Like, getting into a routine, kind of like Nick was saying with his basketball. I think, Nick, you just do the basketball once or twice a week now. But I know you're always like, hey, I need to get to bed early tonight because basketball's tomorrow morning. I think it's getting to that routine where it's like, yep, I know coming up next. I mean, humans in general are creatures of habits. So I think once you get to that routine where it's like, what I want to do next, I already know because it's this day and that's what I like to do on this day. Obviously you switch it up every now and then, but and I think it's also when you kind of know the area where it's like, oh, let's go shopping. Okay, I know exactly where to go.
If I may, on the subject of knowing the area, I found out literally tonight, after having been in this house for coming up on 10 months, that there is a Target or a Super Target. There's Walmart Super Center, which has like everything, and Target has like Super Target, which is like a Target Super Center, which I didn't know Target was so big until I moved to Minnesota. Like there were Targets in Wisconsin, but not anywhere near as many as in Minnesota. But there is a Super Target that is between my house and 694, which is not far. And I literally had no idea that it was tucked back there until today.
If I may,
I did a Google search and found the nearest Target, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
If I may, I think I've driven by that multiple times, so you must not get out very often. That's definitely like right there.
It's a direction I don't go because my office is in the other direction. And if I go to Aldi or somewhere else or to get groceries, I never actually go. I never go in between the two 694 exits. I either go along Central or 47, and I've never been in between the two at the highway. I've literally looked in that direction and seen. I'm saying literally too much. I got to worry about my speech for my interview tomorrow, so I'm critiquing my own speech as I make it. But there's the restaurant Embers that's in between Central and Target, and I've looked at that restaurant 100 times. Not that I'm all that interested in going, but I've looked at that restaurant 100 times and never wondered what was past it. There's a whole Super Target there, evidently.
Just a hiding Target.
Yeah, how do you hide a Super Target? It's monstrous. But
so
evidently that's how.
So in Seattle this week, we went to Target to pick up some of the essentials because Target has pretty much everything you could ever want. Maybe not the best quality, but it has it. And the Target here, at least the one that we went to, has 2 stories. It's like 2 Targets on like a Target, and then there's another Target on top of it. It was crazy. It was awesome.
Well, evidently Target doesn't have pop filters, so fun fact.
Well, things you learn. All right, Nick, what's going on in your life? What's happening?
Before we jump into mine, what was Kyle saying?
I'm proud of you for looking, Nick.
Yeah, I tried. I needed to pick up an energy drink for that interview. It's I'm doing a dry run at like 8 a.m. and then I have the actual interview at like 9:30.
All right.
So that'll be an adventure. But I wanted a little kick in the pants for tomorrow morning. Make sure I'm awake, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed.
If I
But
may, that would be a horrible life decision for me. I think anytime I've had an energy drink, it's been, oh my God, it's an energy. Like, I just get wired. So good luck with that. Kyle can attest to that. I think he fed me my first one, and I literally couldn't blink because I was that just jacked up on energy drink. So
you're not supposed to have the whole thing. You're supposed to have a little bit.
are you not supposed to chug it?
Go into that story after Nick's life update. That's a pretty good one.
All right, you can tell it. You can tell it. All right, go ahead, Nick.
So the life update can actually be a number of things. The generic topic I had selected initially was millennials did it again, but as fun as that topic would be, I think I should save that for another time. The topic that kind of crossed my mind between when I wrote that down and when we actually started was the copper country. I'm not sure if any of you guys saw with the Facebook posts that I shared. Houghton got hit with some massive rainstorms this last weekend, and the damage was pretty incredible. Frankly, there were more than 60 reported washouts and sinkholes with respect to the damage from the rain. Evidently, certain areas were hit with between 6 and 8 inches of water in a period of just a couple hours overnight. And if you get a chance to look at the pictures, they're pretty incredible. A main street that actually Megan lived on, evidently, Agate, was entirely washed out. The road completely destroyed. The dirt underneath the road washed down the hill, and the sewers that were evidently recently put in were exposed, which is a bit hilarious, frankly. But the roads were destroyed, sinkholes everywhere. It's Michigan Tech, so of course there's a bunch of nerds with drones taking footage, which turned out amazing. I wish I could see all the footage of all the individuals who posted, but I can only get the ones that my family and or friends are connected to or share and like. So a lot of great footage overlooking the damage. No fatalities that I'm aware of, which is very fortunate. I think we only saw one car that got swept into off the road that was falling apart and into a low area. Presumably the individual got out at some point and survived and didn't have a huge issue. The car, of course, was totaled, buried in sand and mud and water. So there was some really cool footage, but the damage was absolutely crazy. Roads washed away. I believe that the Taco Bell near Walmart and that around M26, there's all those different businesses. There's an insurance agency, there's a Taco Bell, and these are all featured in the drone footage on the Facebook profile. Or on my Facebook profile picture, or not picture, video that I posted, whatever. The whole area was essentially washed away. People were saying that there was a valley up the hill that they had, hiked a couple times, and it was just an empty ravine. There wasn't ever any water in it, but because so much got dumped so quickly, it turned into a river, and that river, flowed down the hill and ended up taking out huge sections of parking lots. I think the buildings managed to not fall in. I don't understand the construction. I was talking with Megan about it, and she was saying that under buildings, the ground is much more heavily packed down and would therefore not erode as quickly as other areas. But there's an insurance agency building that's hanging off of the edge of a washed out area. The Taco Bell parking lot and drive-through, literally at the edge of the building, essentially, is this giant gully or river that flowed through. The Taco Bell sign, actually, I guess that doesn't qualify as a building, was swept away with the water, knocked over, rather. Now that most of the water's moved into the portage and out, it's just a lot of mud and mess. there was a state of disaster, not an emergency. Local folks declared an emergency, obviously, but then the state level, they just declared a disaster. So I think the National Guard and a few other folks are headed up there to fix the roads. Fortunately, my mother's house that's up there was not impacted. She's on a pretty big hill where she's at, on M26 on the Hancock side. But her house is fine, no damage. Both sides of the road, however, which historically has always had cars on it, were washed out. So for the first time in probably more than 100 years, though, I will say that for the first time in more than 100 years, there wasn't a car that drove through Mason.
Wow.
Just because theoretically, as long as there have been cars there, I can almost guarantee one went down that road. I will bet that is the first time in more than 100 years that a car did not come down M26 at least once during the day.
So could this have been prevented at all, or is this just such an epic of like Noah and the Ark Lee type rainstorm that there's nothing you could do about it?
That's a lot of rain. We don't know. I mean, Megan and I were discussing that and looking at the pictures and kind of in awe of everything that was going on. And she's a civil engineer, but apparently that's not her specific specialty. She was explaining it, but she does have a friend who works in, the sewer water and the sewer piping kind of situation. So we were talking about that with respect to, is it a, once in 100 years, once in 1,000 years, or was something wrong? And especially with Agate Street, they had been replacing the sewers and the piping while we were still in college. So hypothetically, this is supposed to be, brand new, brand spanking, good looking stuff that should be able to handle anything normal. So unless something was done incorrectly, I have to assume that it was a freak storm that came through and dumped well beyond what would ever be a normal expected amount of water, which is almost funny because my mother said, she went to a movie the night before, Ocean's 8 or whatever, the girl power one for Ocean's 11.
Seems fitting.
I actually want to see that. I like those movies. But she saw that and then she went home and went to bed, and evidently she recognized that it was raining, but outside of that, never really had an issue. But the pictures, if you get a chance to search, Houghton torrential rains or Houghton flooding, Houghton washouts and sinkholes, there's some pretty cool stuff out there. Again, it's only cool because no one got hurt, a lot of money lost, but hopefully everyone who was hurt has insurance. But the views from the drone footage were especially cool with respect to being able to go directly over everything. The one that's by the Taco Bell, I think was the coolest to me. Not because I love Taco Bell, but I do. But more importantly, because the drone was able to be right over the source of water, and you actually see on one side of the road that was partially washed out, there's like a vortex of the water spiraling and sucking everything in. And then on the other side of the road, what I'm going to estimate is 50 yards away, maybe 40, you see water popping out and exploding out. And it was just mind-boggling for me to picture the pipe and or the natural tunnel that was essentially created by all of that water and everything being sucked down. And there were people walking in the parking lots right next to the area that was washed out. And I'm sitting here thinking, why are you anywhere near that while this much water is flowing? It can still get washed out. I mean, especially in the early morning hours, before noonish, the water was still, just flowing down at a crazy rate, and it could still wash something out. If you get sucked into that, there's no way it's a straight shot. There's no way you're going to be able to hold your breath or not get caught on something and then hope you get spit out the other side in one piece. It was scary to think about, but
oopsie. Running water in general is super crazy. It's a lot of force. Water is a lot more dense than people expect it. I think even like an inch of running water can knock somebody off their feet, and a foot can sweep a car away. So it's crazy how much force nature has in general, especially with flooding and running waters.
Oh, absolutely.
I think one thing too that's always insane to me is just how people underestimate how a flood is. Like you always hear, oh, it's flooding, and people are out there on their rafts and their kayaks, and it's just like you're on a street, and it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's like, do you realize how dangerous that could potentially be? You know, all you need is for maybe unless you die, and then it's not worth it.
Things where they have like people in the background of the reporter. The reporter's like, "It's so dangerous out here," blah blah blah, and there's people in the background like running around, skipping and screaming and having a good time. That's always funny.
Pretty much, yeah.
There's raining in the street. It's a pond. It's like, no, it's a flowing death water. I don't know. It's just, I never got that. People never make the right decision.
I remember seeing one where the reporter's trying to they're like kneeling in the water or something like that to make it look like it's way worse than it is. And the guy walks right behind her. It's like ankle deep.
Oh, that reminds me of there's a CNN thing probably 5 years ago, maybe more now, where they're trying to show something that was happening in 2 different states, but some viewer deduced that it was actually they were in the same parking lot, and they said they were in 2 completely different locations, but they're just in one giant parking lot recording like 2 people corresponding back and forth. Back to you, Phil. And it's like, oh no, Phil is literally like just across like a couple of stalls down.
Yeah, they just turn the camera.
Yeah. Oh my god.
It was one camera crew to the home. The camera just flips around quick.
If I may, as an accountant, that makes me quite proud. I would call that budget reporting if I've ever seen it.
Oh, definitely on a budget. All right.
If we can circle back to the water running in Houghton, the last note I'll share on it, it was again very good to see that there were no major injuries, no deaths as far as I'm aware. If there were any, that's sad news, and hopes and thoughts and prayers with the individuals affected. Outside of deaths and injury, it will be interesting to see how the area recovers. That was another discussion Megan and I were having, looking at especially near all those businesses, the buildings. I don't know if you need to tear those down, or how do you fill in the now ravine that goes through a very commercial area. Do you fill that in with gravel? Do you try and stop future flows? Do you build a bridge where a road once stood without need of a bridge? I would be very curious. I like learning about that kind of stuff. How do you fix something like that after a disaster? What are the lasting impacts? Do you not build along that spillway? Do you have to tear down again those buildings? And how long will that storm have scars on the Copper Country? It'll be interesting to see, and especially there's only 2-lane roads for most of the Copper Country as it stands. When you have construction once every couple of years, it's bad enough. Well, that many areas hit, you're going to have a lot of temporary roads, and it'll be interesting to see how it gets all pieced together.
Well, it's crazy with engineering stuff in general, how like the levees in blanking New Orleans, where they're like, oh, like it's protect us against 99.9% of the storms, and then the 0.1% storm hits, and it's like, oh, okay, now we're going to re-engineer and make it better. So it's always a cost thing initially. It's kind of funny to go through and all these preventative measures that people typically, they're like, oh, scientists were talking about it for years, but they just never did it because money. So I'm guessing they'll set up something that can now handle those floods up to the 99.99 percentile storm. Yeah. It's just one of those things that it's sad when there's, especially when it's not a crazy storm where it should have handled it and it just was never utilities or whatever weren't repaired or maintained to the point that they should have been because of money, where money got in the way of concern for people's safety. I don't know if that was the case in this particular situation, but it's always interesting to look at those when they come up and be like, okay, how freak of a storm was this, and could have been prevented in the first place.
The individual I think I'd like to talk to or pick their brain if I ever had the opportunity is I'd love to meet someone who plans, and I'm sure it's a group of people and there's a lot to consider, but whoever leads or whoever plans post disaster, when you have a New Orleans, when you have even, again, this is relatively small scale. Let's not compare those. It's not fair, but for the sake of this discussion, I will. You have a New Orleans, you have a Houghton situation, you have a disaster of a scale that is monstrous. Again, those two aren't really comparable, but forgive me on that one. When you have something like that happen, I'd like to meet someone whose job it is to put all of that back together. And I would be curious what that individual's like, what experiences they have, where they can look at a disaster of any scale and say, yep, that's what happened. And here's how we're going to fix everything, from the cleanup to the recreating the basis of everything that went through there, the city planning, the sewers, the electrical, and I mean, new money, new technology, you can, soup everything up, but to take it all the way from disaster cleanup and relief to rebuilding a city, or in Houghton's case, rebuilding the one nice area that has all the modern things. Someone who can visualize that process step for step and walk through it, that'd be cool. And I know there may not be one person, but if there ever was, that'd be just to pick their brain and understand how their mind works and how they have the experience to walk step for step or step by step through that entire relief effort to recreate everything that was and make it even better. That'd be kind of cool.
All right. So on that note, Kyle, Kyle, you've been kind of traveling around over what some people think is phenomenal architecture and city planning. What are some things on your honeymoon that's impressed you in terms of, like, you've looked at it and said, wow, that's really cool, or I can't believe they made that, or oh my gosh, like, this is one of the ways the city's
actually, one thing that you meant that came to mind the moment you said that was Rome. So their public transportation, unlike other European areas, the Rome public transportation is surprisingly not as good as others, and that's primarily because of the ancient ruins and buildings and whatnot there that they don't want to disturb or mess with. So like they only have 3 subway lines in the entire city, which is apparently very, very, very low for that big of a city and that dense of a city. And the city itself, size-wise, is about as big as London, and there's different areas that are restricted to building heights and whatnot, especially around the special monuments. But they can't put in new subway lines to make it a more modern city because of all the old buildings, and they don't want to disturb anything. And plus, all the stuff that is there is crazy old, and you disturb it a little bit, and you have the very high potential of ruining it. So I think that's one thing that was kind of interesting about Rome and the architecture in general was, it's all super cool to look at, but it's because of that, it's also kind of affecting the people's way of life there because they can't update the lifestyle to a more modern lifestyle. So going around Rome, it's like they'll either take a really expensive taxi, because taxis were crazy expensive in Rome. Uber's not allowed. So for us to get across the city, it was actually surprisingly cheaper than I thought. It was like $25 to get across the city. A lot of the taxis from the airport to the center of Rome were like $60-$70 or euro to get to the center of Rome from the train station. It wasn't that far of a drive. We ended up taking the train, above ground train. That was still €12 each, just to get in the middle of the city, which was definitely the way to go as far as cheapness. But it's just like, dang, like Juliana, her cousin, I guess, cousin now as well, lives in Rome, and her and her friend kind of took us around the city, kind of showed us some sites that you wouldn't normally see as a tourist per se. And one of the things that her cousin's friend was saying is that they just can't build any new subway lines because of all the architecture, and they don't want to disturb it. It was actually the friend was actually an architect too, so that was kind of cool. He was kind of explaining some of the building's meanings, and like for example, in this one plaza, there was a building that was made, and there was a huge fountain, or not a huge fountain, but like a fountain in middle statue, and I'm trying to think. They're in Egypt. The things that go straight up in the sky.
A pyramid. A sphinx.
No, not a pyramid. They're like spikes.
Obelisk.
They're like spikes. Obelisk. That's the word. There's like an obelisk with 4 statues all around it, and it was 2 different architects that made it. So they actually like wanted to tell a story. So the architect that made the obelisk had 4 famous writers or whatever on it, and the one's kind of like not wanting to look up at the building, which was a church, and then they then had to put a statue on the church of Mother Mary to like kind of complete the story. It was kind of cool how like as they build new things, they try to incorporate it into the old things as well to tell a story in the city with the architecture.
That's kind of like a thing that I've noticed too with any sort of area that has tourist attractions. So this isn't quite Rome by any scale, but walking around the zoo, which has been around for a long time, you notice like the way exhibits are and the way that paths go. It's like you have to walk around the exhibits. You can't go through them. You can't make like the most, it's easy to just go straight path, but it's like, no, you have to go kind of weave around and do some circles because you don't want to disturb the area, the spaces that have what people are coming to see. So it's an interesting thing where, you have this really nice attraction, but then you also have, hey, look at this travel thing. What gives? Do you say, well, I'm going to be the most efficient travel I can be, or am I going to be the most interesting thing to look at? It's a good balance, tough balance. All right, so
Excellent.
yeah, I want to touch on just a quick point, and then we'll probably wrap this up. But I recently went to a concert. It was really fun, really great. If you've never gone to a concert, like a concert of a group that you don't know too much about, like maybe you only know a song or two, and just kind of go from an outside observer's perspective, it's incredibly interesting. But one thing that really kind of bugged me, and something I've noticed to all the different musical concerts I've ever been to, is every single one always seems to have an encore. And that just bugs it. Like, they leave stage and come back to play songs that they could have easily played in the main part because they're some of their biggest songs, but they're saving them so they get an encore. And it's just like, is that necessary to have an encore after every single concert?
I think for a lot of concerts, I don't think it's every single concert. I guess I've only been to a handful, but I guess now that you say that the ones they have done an encore. But my guess would be that it's kind of up to the musicians if they're feeling it, and also kind of how many extra songs they want to play. If they're feeling it, the crowd's loving them, and they're giving them a lot of energy and good vibes. That live performances feed off of that. If they're not getting good vibes, they might come back one song for their encore just to get on with it. But I know when Julian and I, we went to watch Train concert, and yeah, those guys came back on and they played for another like half hour, 45 minutes. And it's like, damn, but they had good vibes and kept it going. So I don't know, that's kind of cool. I think the encore is expected. However, my guess would be that they have a set time they're required to play, and the encore is literally just the extra. And for them, it's up to how well they're liking the audience or how well the audience is responding. I don't know, maybe Nick has more experience with concerts than me.
Unfortunately, I don't have more experience, but I would agree with your initial statement of the concert is almost definitely, as long as it's required to be per the contract, per whatever, and the encore is extra. Um, Live performances being what they are, and you've probably only been to a handful that were probably pretty big names and or were in areas where there were a lot of fans, because typically only fans go to see their favorite bands or whatever groups play. Um, I I can't imagine seeing it or it happening, but I'm sure at some point in time that there was a band that went out, didn't play all that well, and they were, everyone appreciated them, but they had to have finished up and then gone off the stage and, were willing to do an encore, but the crowd wasn't loving them that much. Like you could, I'm sure bands that are starting out that are average probably have that happen on a pretty regular basis with respect to you go out, you perform, you do your set, people enjoyed it, they thank you when you go off, but then as soon as you're off, the applause stops. In a situation like that, if they come out and do an encore, it's one of those where you're basically walking away or you're tuned out and then they jump back in. If you ever see that, I think that would be weird. But as long as you guys phrased it, the crowd is feeling it, the band is feeling it, that relationship, that energy passing from one to the other back and forth, will almost always feed an encore. And maybe if they're super experienced or they're an older band, their encore might only be a couple songs because they've done this a billion times. I mean, you can't say that this time, their 100 millionth time, or way too high of a number, but their 1000th show, they're not probably going to do an encore that's as long. They'll do an encore if they're loved and they played well. Of course, there'll be an encore. That's normal. That's the standard, and people want them to play. But I think if you get a younger, newer band, those guys and girls, because we don't want to be sexist, could go for an additional hour and or more, because they're so excited, they're so passionate, they've got that energy, they're living off of that. Not that older artists don't have that. I would say they're less likely to go the distance as far as a super long encore.
And if I may, though,
I think there are bands.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, that doesn't bug me as much. I completely agree. Like, if the energy is going and they're going beyond their allotted time. But in this case, at least for the concert I was at, it's one of those things where, hey, the concert ends at 8:30, and that's like that. The concert's done at 8:30, and that's 8:15, and they are getting off, and then come back and play 2 more songs. It's like, well, you still ended at 8:30. You just are literally leaving so you can come back and do an encore. It seems like it's we're gonna do an encore for the sake of having an encore, but we really don't, it's more of a tradition, or there's not any of that, like, we're giving you more energy. It's just, we're going to leave the stage for a little bit and come back, and we don't even care how long you clap for. It's just expected.
A bigger band or a no-name band?
It was,
because it sounds like a no-name.
It was a big band. It was the Violent Femmes, which sing Blister in the Sun. If you don't know that song, you should listen to it. It's awesome. Highly entertaining concert. They were kind of bigger in, like, they started in the 80s, like 1980, and they're kind of bigger through that. But I mean, it's a group from Milwaukee, actually, but it's a bigger band. It was a sold out show. Yeah, it was weird. It was just like, why are you leaving? Just stay. Bugged me. Well,
I think the new band version of that would be if they try out new material, where they're like, hey, they play like their standards, especially if they're doing I forgot what it's called, but you do the you warm up the crowd for the main act or whatever. I think when they want to try new material, that's kind of like the new band version of an encore. I think that's probably a little better of a compliment to the audience, of the musician and the audience feeling each other. Is like, hey, I've done my standard stuff. You guys are obviously liking it. I'm going to try something new. Go with it to, get a crowd reaction off of that too.
So
version
what I will
of,
say is they did have the greatest encore song. They sang a song that of theirs, but basically the whole gist of it was, "Please don't go, please don't go. Like, we want you to stay." And I mean, it was obviously meant to be for a girl, but it just worked out perfectly as everyone's like, everyone with the little kids were walking out, and they're like, "No, don't go. Like, please don't go." And it's just, it was pretty funny. It was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, I guess we're not gonna have an encore today because once this is over, it's over. So, Kyle, you wanna give us our closing segment?
If I
Sure,
may,
the closing segment.
the closing segment
go
should
ahead.
be led by the host.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you guys. What would, if you could like have one skill that you don't have right now, but you like just instantly get it, like you get that 10,000 hours of practice in, and you're just like phenomenal at it. What would that be? What would you want?
Yeah, so for me, I think I was kind of thinking I had kind of two examples. One is more practical, I would say, is like all of a sudden becoming an expert at the stock market. I feel like that would be an ideal thing to all of a sudden be just super expert on. You know everything that you need to know about the stock market. That would definitely be useful in life. The second one, I would say, as more of a less practical, more fun, would be flying. Whether that's either A, flying a plane, instantly know how to fly a plane, or B, the other thought I had was like those squirrel suits. Instantly become like super good at flying those like parachuting squirrel suits and be able to do that just instantly, know exactly what to do. That would be super fun.
Those are both pretty good examples. I had two initial thoughts as well. The skill, if we're saying skill, I would jump to superpower just because that's my thought, and had a couple options go through my head. The classics, teleportation, flying, healing, like your Wolverine or something like that. All those skills would be cool. My personal favorite would probably be instant teleportation, just the ability to be anywhere. You don't like the weather, you don't like where you're at, or you don't want to, you want fresh coffee from wherever, just boom, gone, right back. Awesome. Just that kind of movement would be awesome. The more practical skill.
Instant teleportation, you basically have flying as well, because you can just go like teleport like really quickly, and you can basically fly at the same time.
Oh, it's so much work. It's so much work.
Would you keep your acceleration though, or velocity? So like if you teleported really high up, yeah, or can you choose your velocity on teleportation?
Because hypothetically, what do you do? If you're falling and you fall a couple 100 feet, can you teleport like to somewhere else? Or when you teleport yourself, does your momentum continue? These are hypotheticals that don't matter, but interesting trains of thought. And yes, I do wonder that same stuff in my bored moments. As far as a more practical skill, what is one skill you wish you had that you don't? I'm past my athletic prime as far as being able to play in the NBA or play in the NFL. So we'll take the athletic aspects out of it. The skill I wish I had that I don't would be people skills. I'm pretty good in a lot of ways in communicating and dealing with people, but I look at it from that angle. I deal with people. I communicate when I need to, and I can be super friendly and be awesome. But there are certain people in life, and you can probably pick out one or two if you just were to pinpoint someone who's impacted your life. Where like, wow, yeah, I only ever talked to him once or twice, but he was awesome. He was fun. He was great to be around. People skills like that, where you're just a likable person, where you're always someone who someone else wants to hang out with. Now that may be more than one skill, certainly, but that's kind of skill set where it's so easy to make friends. It's so easy to connect with people. And I again think I'm good in a lot of ways, but There's ways to improve that are well beyond anything I'll ever be, where you're that guy who just gets the invite to go on the millionaire's yacht. You're that guy who's like, oh yeah, by the way, I fly helicopters, and oh, you have a helicopter? Oh, hey, let's go fly it. Like, just that kind of access and people skills where you're just that guy who's involved with everything and does all this cool stuff.
If I may, having a helicopter, like having people skills and being able to fly a helicopter are two totally separate skills.
Okay, but that was
I think Nick
the topic.
He'd have a people skill where if he knew a guy with a helicopter, he'd go up to him, make friends, and then be able to jump on his helicopter pretty much whenever because he's good friends with him automatically.
That'd be cool. Having seen yachts in the sound,
being a pilot would be good too.
Oh my gosh! But like on my runs, I see like yachts every once in a while. It's just like, oh, how did I become friends with that guy? That'd be great.
See,
I want to go on my boat. I want to go on the boat. Like Kyle's on the boat. I guess the skill I go with
bring a case of beer.
Yeah, I'll bring beer. You bring the $1 million boat. Deal? That sounds fair. Yeah. 30 rack, of course. I guess for skill, I'd go with golf. I mean, it's just one of those things where I never want to go golfing because I suck at it. And it's like, why would I pay money to do something I suck at? Which is kind of a very negative feedback loop of not good at golf, don't go golfing, don't get better at golf, so forth and so forth. And it's not like it's a game that interests me terribly much, but it's one of those where like, if I was actually good at it, I think I could get into it a lot. You're outside, you're walking around, you have a good level of competition. It just seems like a pretty cool skill.
If when we ever retire and we're in the same area, I vote we have an If I May golf league. Every like once or twice a week we get together and have play golf on a given day.
I'd be down for that. Come in.
Retirement goals. I've got them.
Dibs driving the golf cart.
There you go.
You can drive.
No.
oh, just nope. I'm doing it. All right.
You're driving. I'm drinking.
Well, fair enough. Driving is the best part though. So
I want to do like there's like the polo. I want to do like truck polo. Have you seen that? Or like you have the driver and the passengers in the side, and he has they're playing polo but with like trucks.
I've seen real life Rocket League where they have a giant soccer ball. The goalie is a construction pickup arm, like in the sandbox, except the giant version. And they play soccer with old minivans that are somehow running but barely, and they play with the giant soccer ball. And the goaltender is the construction equipment. So those were kind of cool. Now, completely impractical. Your vehicle would get hit once and shut down, and
that's why I get a beater.
Goalie has to not kill anybody.
And there's no run.
No. Well, that'd be fun.
With that, I'm going to steal Brent's clothes and say that was episode 5 of If I May. I hope you all enjoyed. We will be coming out with a new podcast every Thursday. You can now find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, and we will see you next time.
And follow us on Twitter.